Hey, this is Pastor Bunjee Garrett, and I want to take this opportunity to present you with another word of encouragement. Well, here we are, it's election day, and now that the lunar eclipse is over, millions of Americans are now heading to the polls in order to cast their vote. According to one Economist YouGov poll, which was conducted during the first week of November, 68% of Americans say that they'll be thinking about inflation as they go and cast their vote. 73% will also be considering the economic situation here in our country as they cast their vote. And the same poll also revealed the reason why. And we discover in this poll that only 11% of Americans say that they are financially better off than they were just a year ago. At the same time, 43% say that they are actually worse off than a year ago. And while our failing economy is reason enough to go and vote now for conservative leaders, there are so many more reasons, which include the crime rates that continue to rise in many cities across our country. As a matter of fact, there's a new analysis from the Heritage Foundation, which helps us to see that the vast majority of cities where violent crime has been on the rise, well, these cities are mainly run by Democrat mayors. As a matter of fact, the authors of this analysis examined the data from the 30 cities that have the highest murder rates in the U.S. Here's what they discover, and I quote here, of those 30 cities, 27 have Democratic mayors, the exceptions being Lexington and Jacksonville, which have Republican mayors, and Las Vegas, whose mayor is an independent. In other words, 90% of the cities here in the U.S. with the highest murder rates are run by Democrats. And I have no doubt that this is largely due to their soft on-crime policies. For example, do you remember back in 2020 when Democratic leaders allowed pseudo-anarchists to take over city streets and parks? For example, I'll remind you, it was there in Seattle. That's where the mayor sat back and allowed the rioters to take control of 4 city blocks, as then she assured her city that this CHOP or Chaz zone was just a block party. Just a block party. They're just having a good time. They're just kids having a good time, right? Well, when all was said and done, this cop-free zone saw a 525% surge in crime, which included 2 fatal shootings and robberies before, the police finally moved in and crushed the whole protest. This is the sort of soft on crime, progressive policy that has allowed violent crime rates to rise in these Democratic run cities. And not only that, but the same analysis also helps us to discover here that, and I quote from this analysis again, within those 30 cities, there are at least 14 Soros-backed or Soros-inspired rogue prosecutors. Or in other words, at least 14 of these 30 cities, almost half, have prosecutors who aren't really prosecuting criminals, according to their agenda. And as a result, criminals quickly end up back on the streets where they feel free to go commit more crimes because they're really not going to be prosecuted. Oh, and let's not forget about the reason for why so many people were forced to flee from their blue state as they head to a red state, because, governors in those blue states were using their emergency executive powers to keep businesses closed while allowing big box stores to remain open. They shut down schools, they stopped graduation ceremonies, they closed the parks, the beaches, the backyard parties, and even funerals. They forbid nursing home visitors, and they banned hospital visitations. They stopped expecting fathers from entering the delivery room while their child was being born. They shut down concerts, movies, and church services while simultaneously allowing protests and riots. Worst of all were the governors who tried to enforce vaccine mandates upon every eligible person, regardless of religious convictions or prior infections. And in light of all these things, listen, today is the day to deal with all of this. Today is the day when every American should go and tell these progressive politicians to pound sand. If you haven't already, then I encourage you to go and vote for conservative leaders who will lead in a conservative way. We need leaders who will lead our nation by protecting our God-given rights, which include life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and personal property. And would it be to God that we would have Christian leaders like our second president, John Adams, who once declared this, and I quote, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." In other words, the immoral people who want to abort babies and mutilate kids who are suffering from gender dysphoria, yet these people will never be able to lead our nation correctly because they don't get the Constitution. They don't understand the original intent of the Christian leaders who created the Constitution. And listen, the proof of my point has never been more evident than it is today. With that being the case, I encourage you to embrace the statement that John Adams made when he declared, and I quote, "We recognize no sovereign but God and no king but Jesus." Christian, listen, as you go to the polls today, then I encourage you to remember Jesus is our King. He is the King of Kings. Therefore, we ought to vote in such a way that our King Jesus will be honored by the people we vote for. I like the way that Paul put it in Colossians chapter 3. It's verse 17 where he declares, "Whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him." As we head to the polls today, let's make sure that we're casting our vote according to the name, or in other words, according to the character of King Jesus. And as we do, let's remember to give God the Father thanks. Let's give him the thanks that we actually live in a nation that was founded by leaders who created a constitution that recognizes our God-given rights. And it's time today to vote in such a way that we can take back these rights. With that being the case, we should make our voices heard at the polls as we continue to fight the good fight of faith, and all for the glory of God.